Welcome to the Insurance Brokers Podcast, Helpful Hints. Here we break down the best, most informative bits of our full-length interviews.
So I thought maybe what might be quite interesting, because you have quite an interesting background, is if you can talk us through who you are and what your kind of background is.
Well, I'll certainly try, Sarah, and I'll hopefully not take up the whole podcast while I do it. But so I'm David Lewis. I started my insurance career a long way back in 1978 when I was at Aberystwyth University. I was very bored studying pure mathematics and saw an advert in the South Wales Echo for the Norwich Union, who were looking for a trainee life consultant at the time. And much to my mum and dad's dismay, I applied for the job and got the job. So for the first 4 years, I was trained by the NU in Cardiff. And then I had something of a revelation. I very quickly realised that the power in the insurer-broker relationship, in my view at that time, sat very much with the broker. It was the broker who decided whether they were going to use my services or the services of Norwich Union rather than my expertise. So for me, I wanted to move into broking, get into the sharp end, start talking to clients more, perhaps be in a bit more control of my own destiny. So in 1982, I moved across to a small national broker called the Medical Insurance Agency, who specialised in doctors and dentists and nurses insurance. I ran the office in Cardiff for about 3 years, and then finally moved into what I called the big time at that time in my career, which was a job with Willis Faber in Cardiff, and that was really fascinating because I joined them as a personal financial planner. I had an interview in Cardiff, and apparently that went reasonably well. And eventually I got sent up to Trinity Square in London for my quite daunting interview with a gentleman called Simon Batt, who led the financial planning division at that time. And we had quite a long chat about me and my background and so on and so forth. And then he said to me, David, so do you have a strong technical knowledge? And I said, well, I think so, Mr. Batt, with some degree of trepidation, wondering what was about to happen next. And so he said to me, so if I ask you to tell me about the inheritance tax laws, you would be able to do that, would you? And I thought, here we go. I said, well, I think I probably would, Mr. Batt, expecting him to then ask me a very detailed question about the inheritance tax laws. But in those days, Willis Faber was a great blue chip organisation, very much a gentleman's club in the old-fashioned sense. And he simply said, well, that sounds good enough to me. Shall we go to lunch? You're welcome to the team. So I didn't get asked any difficult questions, and my career with Willis started then. About 4 or 5 years later then, I moved into the general side of the business. We had a very visionary managing director in Willis in Cardiff, a guy called Roger Fish, who, when he had a vacancy in the general team to fill, didn't feel constrained by my background. It wasn't a case of, well, you've come from the life side, so therefore you can't possibly make the transition to the general side. And he took a chance on me and offered me this role in the general side of the business, which I took. I headed that up in Cardiff for a few years. And then in the early part of the 90s was invited to go up to Trinity Square in London to take on a European role for what was at that point Willis Wrightson. Did that until 2001 before I moved across to Marsh McLennan in Tower Place to do pretty much the same job, but if I'm honest, for a little bit more money. Who doesn't? Thoroughly enjoyed that. And stayed there until 2007, and then had what my wife called a midlife crisis. We'd spent a little bit of time in the Algarve in Portugal and got to know a fairly well-known property developer down in the Algarve quite well. And I jokingly said to them over a bottle of wine one Christmas, your insurance and risk management is a mess, and if ever you want it done properly, give me a call. And much to my surprise, 3 months later, they did. They rang me and asked if I'd like to go and join them. And so we moved the whole family to the Algarve, had 3 of the best years of our lives, I think. It taught me a lot, actually, from a business perspective. Finally being able to see things from the client's perspective taught me lessons that even in that 3-year window, I still remember today. And so it was not only a great time, it was quite a good learning experience for me too.
That sounds like a kind of excellent midlife crisis. That's the kind of midlife crisis I want.
Midlife crises go, yeah. I thought that. Not even sports car nonsense. So we stayed there for a few years, and it was really only when our children got to the age where they really needed to move into mainstream education, that my wife and I wanted to bring them back to sort of the UK education system. But we got so used to living by the sea, we didn't really want to go back into London again. So Willis also had another job, this time in Guernsey, in their captive practice. It was a consultancy role, something I'd not done before. I was lucky enough to get that job. So we moved to Guernsey in around 2010, I think, and worked for the captive practice in Guernsey for a couple of years before coming back to London to head up their consultancy practice for Europe. And then that's a very long rambling story, but 2 years ago I then decided to take, I jokingly said to my wife, I want to take semi-retirement. It's turned out it's been nothing like semi-retirement, it's more like a full-time job. But I left Willis and took up consultancy role and a couple of non-executive director positions. I'm now non-exec director for a large regional insurance broker, Thomas Carroll. I'm the chairman of a very niche insurance business in Cornhill in London, and I act on the board of a couple of charities down here in Cardiff. So a long rambling journey, Sarah, but you did ask.